Well, hello. You know, all summer we have been going what? Full force into jam making, and you know why? Because when seasonal fruit is ready, when it is ripe, when it is here to pick on the farm, you go for it. So right now today, it's cherry preserves, cherry jam. You know, what I love is you can tell that I already pitted these because no one wants to sit here and watch me pit these for as long as it can take. Now, after you pit cherries, these are sour cherries, so I grow Montmorency and North Star. And after you pit them, they can start browning pretty quickly. So you either want to freeze them right away or put them in the fridge overnight and then make like a cherry preserve. You could also make pie, cobbler, anything. Freezing them is super easy too. Now, you can use a cherry pit or whatever you want. I'm from a different generation apparently. My grandma taught me to use an antique bobby pin or an antique hairpin. It's extra big, has a loop on the end, and it just helps it for me. She said, since Caleb, you don't have fingernails, I just get in there with that and I can pop them out. Whatever works for you. My mom is able to use her thumb fingernail. I don't know. Anyway, this is just a delicious, kind of simple cherry preserve. It has pieces of the fruit in it, which I love. That's the difference usually between preserves and or like a jelly. Jelly is just the fruit juice that is, you know, thickened into like a jelly, where preserves are gonna actually have pieces of the fruit, and that's what I like. You still get some of those pieces, you know what you're eating. I love that texture to use on different things. So to start, as I do with canning, I have everything ready. I have my sterilized jars ready to go, my lids, my rings. I have a heavy bottom kettle, and this is what we're gonna cook the jam in. This is actually a small jam pot or jam pan. It has a heavy stainless steel bottom. It's also stainless steel itself. You don't have to use a jam pan, you could use a large Dutch oven, anything that is going to be heavier and retain the heat well. I have my hot water bath on the stove, just on low, keeping it warm, so when I get to that point, it's ready to go. When everything is ready, canning is so much easier and the process goes really quickly. So this is what's great about jams. They're simple and they don't take many ingredients. To start, we're gonna put in our cherries. So these are all pitted sour cherries. Now, I like sour cherries because they add a lot more kind of like depth and oomph, and I like that tart sweet thing that goes on. You could use a sweet cherry. It'll change the flavor profile, and I would definitely cut on the sugar, but you can do that. So always, 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 it needs some acidity. For me, it's usually gonna be lemon. Now, in some cases, I like to actually taste the lemon and the amount can change, or I would put zest in. In this case, I don't want to. I just wanna brighten and wake up all those cherries and really give them good flavor. So I'm adding just enough lemon juice that's gonna kind of just make it pop. Make sure you notice it. So what do we need for preserves or jam? You need sugar. So my sugar is honestly, and I think this freaks some people out, it is less sugar than a lot of older recipes are. Now, you can get low sugar pectin and you can make it with that. I don't like to do that, mostly because I don't like the texture of a pectin when it's in a box. It can make it almost gloppy. It can get a little bit too thick for me. I like it to have a little bit more consistency that you can spread it easily and it doesn't kind of get too thick to be able to spread. It's up to you. But again, it's a treat that you use every so often. So the one ingredient I do like to add to mine is some Kirsch, which is a cherry flavored brandy. Now, the alcohol mostly cooks off when you're in that process, but I love the slight brandy cherry flavor. I think it balances everything out. You don't taste it and think like, ooh. No, it's just a delicious, great kind of flavor balancer. Now, if you've watched my other videos on preserve making, I do the Christine Ferber method, which I love. And it's where I'm going to bring this up to a boil, a rolling boil, which means a boil that can't be stirred down. So as you stir it, it is still boiling. And then I drain off the juice. Then we're gonna cook that juice to 221 degrees, which will get it to a thickened consistency. It makes it just the right temperature. And then we'll put it all together and we'll can it. This is at a rolling boil, and it only takes like 5 minutes to get there, but what that does is really draw out the juices from the cherries. It dissolves all the sugar that we put in there. Now it's hot, and so this is why I like to have everything ready. My strainers over my bowl. I wanna make sure that I have good hot pads because there's no point in hurting yourself over jam. It's too fun of a process for hurting. So why I love this method is, I think it really retains the fruit structure, but also the fruit flavor. So we've cooked some of that, that extra kind of juice out of the cherries, but we've retained the actual beautiful cherries, which is the kind of the best part. So what we're doing is all this is pretty much just a sugar syrup. We have the sugar in there with them. I dissolved and it created kind of the base to like what we would use sometimes in candy. So what we're gonna do now is boil that, and as it's boiling, it's gonna cook off the excess water content, and it's gonna let it get to a temperature where it actually starts to thicken that sugar. So it's kind of the perfect process. So I'll let these keep straining. If a little bit more juice kind of comes to the bottom, I'll add it. But we're gonna start cooking this, get it to the right temperature. This is that, it's easy. You're gonna like it if you like cherries, which cherry jam, guys, it's good. We've gotten up to temperature, and you can tell that it's actually condensed that liquid. It's not as much in there. So what we wanna do now is bring everything back up to a hot temperature, because when you can things, it needs to be evenly hot. So you want your cherries to be hot with the liquid and we're actually putting them into. So cherries can have kind of a hard outer cell wall, the actual kind of skin of the cherry. So you could try to mash them. I like to just take an immersion blender. And you know, this can be whatever consistency you like. I like to do a few little tugs. It just kind of helps kind of bring a nicer consistency. I like some pieces, I like some to be a little bit more ground, and you can see there how that's really kind of coming together, and you're getting a little bit more of a preserved consistency where some of them are broken down, some of them are more whole, and that's what I like. So you can kind of make it whatever, you know, you could blend the whole thing if you wanted to, but always do it off heat, never do it on heat, because it can actually splatter and sputter worse. So now I'm gonna bring it back all up to a boil, let it get hot. We're gonna put it into jars. It's just fun to make jam. Think of when it's cold and how glad you're gonna be to have some good jam. Everything came back up to temperature. I just like it to let it come back to a rolling boil. That way you just make sure it's all hot, which is what you want to do before you put it in a hot water bath. So if you feel like your cherries weren't the best color, if you feel like they're just kind of missing something, you could always add a couple drops of some gel food coloring. It kind of just depends. It just brightens everything up and gives you that clean color if you want to. Up to you. You can also, if you want to check the consistency of your jam, have a frozen plate. It's always when it's hot, it's gonna be hard, because when something's really hot like this, it's just really liquidy and it doesn't, you know, want to actually cool down very quickly. So if you have a frozen plate, you can kind of just check, but you can see now as I move the plate around, it's starting to thicken up. You can see it isn't moving too much, which is what you want. And then if you really let it cool off, I could have had my plate in there a little bit longer. You can just kind of draw your finger through it and see. I like it to keep that finger drawn through it, not go back on itself too much. It tastes good. That's always the best part. So I have my jars ready, they're sterilized, and I'm gonna start putting it into the jars. Now, don't be concerned if at first you're like, it's so thin. That's because it's still hot, and it's gonna be hot until it fully cools off. But we're gonna first can this. So when you can something in a hot water bath, you wanna follow the USDA instructions for canning, adjust it for altitude, for safety, because that all makes a difference. So you wanna look up where you live and kind of know what you need to do. But the thing is, things like jam, preserves, the amount of sugar in them make them very safe to can. They go for a very short canning time, and that's kind of the nice thing, that if you're not used to canning, it's a great way to start. So I'm gonna fill all these up, we're gonna put the lids and rings on, and we're done. So I'm putting all the lids and rings on. First, I take a paper towel that I just dipped in hot water and clean off the rim. So I reuse jars over and over for years because they last for a long time. But always check to make sure there's no chips or breaks in it. And then after you fill it, clean it off to make sure there's no contaminants, because you want a good seal. Now, the old method, what some of our grandmas would have done is after you fill a hot jar, some people turn them upside down, or they sometimes literally just seal. That is not safe. You still want to can them in a hot water bath. That's an older way of doing it, but the USDA does not recommend that. So I always also have some extra jars, because sometimes, even though you weigh things, your amounts can slightly change. So just in case, I like to be ready if I need to be. But since I have it on this rack, I can just pick it up. We can just go over to our hot water bath, which makes it so easy. We want to make sure it's boiling, which mine is. I've had it ready. You always want to make sure you either have a canner that came with a rack, or in the bottom of your water bath kettle, you want to have something that lifts the jars slightly off the floor, because you don't want a glass jar to touch the bottom of the kettle, because it could burst or it could break or crack. So we want our water to come over about 1 inch above the jars, which is just perfect right now. We're gonna let them boil in 10 minutes. they're done. See, it's easier than you think. So I'm taking them all out. They were in, it takes like 10 minutes and it's not that long. So I have them right on a rack again, which is pretty simple. Did you hear that? I already heard the pop. That's the best part. Jam really does. It goes together so quickly and it cans and seals so quickly. So a good question that I think is a great thing here is, I had this much in a 6th jar. Now some people would say, oh, I'm just gonna can it. No, this is not the right amount of headspace. Headspace is the amount of room that is left between whatever you're putting in the jar, so in this case preserves, and the lid. Do you hear those dings? They're so nice. You wanna make sure to have the correct amount of headspace in a jar, because for it to have a safe seal, that matters. So if your jar isn't full, put it in the fridge, enjoy it. Now this is still warm, it's still hot, but look at that beautiful, it kind of already is getting a little bit thicker, has a great consistency. It has a great flavor. What I love is, yes, it's sweet. It's a preserve, people. But then it is offset with the tartness of those sour cherries. To me, it is so well balanced. That's what I love about a cherry jam, which usually I'm not a huge cherry person, but a preserve like this, it is bright. It has the fruit in it, but it also has that like tart, sweet balance that you just love. You can use it on so many things. On your toast. You can actually mix this in if you want to and put it, with like a barbecue sauce. I love that because it adds a great sweet layer to it. I also love to always have any of my jams on charcuterie boards or cheese boards, whatever you're gonna have. So there are ways to use it. Once they seal and they come down to room temperature for about 24 hours, you can take the rings off, make sure it's a good seal. That's why you take these rings back off. Then you can store them up to at least a year. Easy, great gifts at Christmas. Keep it for yourself, whatever it is, it's the best thing. So what do I hope you do? I hope you make jam. And I hope you share this video around because yes, it helps me. But it helps so many people see that this is doable. 5 jars of jam, 6 jars of jam. We're talking like an hour, maybe more. If I can do it, I know you can do it. We can all do it. Think how much happier the world will be with jam makers all around just sharing their joy. So check my website, wiseguide.com, for this recipe. So many other recipes for tips, for tricks, garden, indoor, outdoor, it's all there. And until next time, be happy, enjoy someone you love, and share some jam around. That's the point.